This happened a long time ago, back when I was a student. I was a student 25 years ago. I've told this story to a few close friends over the years, and let's just say, I'm not the most extroverted person out there. Maybe that goes some way to explain why I've kept this to myself for so long. Well, the road I'm heading down at this age, I guess it doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, one of my friends, well, maybe my best friend, he loved cars and driving. He called me one night and said he would pick me up in his new car. I knew how excited he was to get that car. It was all he spoke about. It was a Nissan Skyline GTR. Very cool at the time, trust me. Naturally, he wanted to take a drive outside of the city. Well, the only roads that opened up a little, more than the ones in the city, were the ones that led out into the wilderness. I went to university in Nagoya, and there were loads of mountain roads there. Those mountain roads were long and winding, like the song, and the nights were long as a student. So it was always nice to go out. We were heading through these winding roads. My friend was reaching speeds that I didn't prepare for. I doubt he did either. To be honest, had there been something oncoming on one of those sharp corners, we wouldn't be here today. We took a break when we wound up near the summit of the mountain. Well, as far as the roads would take us, there was a parking lot up there. I think it was about 1 a.m. at this point. I figured that we would head back towards the city, maybe stop off somewhere, grab some ramen, and call it a night. That was usual practice during our student days. My friend was racing down those mountain passes. It did stress me out. I told him to slow down more than once, but he told me that there were no cars out on these mountain roads that late. I knew that not to be true. He just kept going faster and faster, and I wished that he didn't. I saw something bright coming up behind us. I looked in the side mirror for a bit, but I couldn't make out what it was. I knew that whatever it was coming at a tremendous speed. My friend noticed it. I saw him glancing in his rearview mirror. He accelerated. He didn't want to be beaten in his new car. He didn't want to let the vehicle behind overtake him. The vehicle behind didn't give in though. It was right on our tail. I don't know why, but maybe we had upset someone that night by the way we were driving or something. Well, that was what I thought at the time anyways. I thought that it was the headlights of a car or a truck or something, but it wasn't clear when they got closer. My friend looked in the rear view mirror, and he said he thought it might be a motorbike that was following us. He said that because he could only see one light behind us. I looked back over my shoulder towards the back window, and I saw that it was a singular light, and it was getting closer. My friend shouted at me to stop looking at it. I snapped back into my chair and sat upright. He told me that it wasn't a natural light. He said when he stared at it, he saw faces emerging and disappearing back into its bright light. He saw something that chilled him to the core, that he slammed the rear view mirror so hard with the ball of his hand that it dropped into my lap. He just kept saying to me again and again, "Don't look back there. Don't look back there." We drove faster. It wasn't a thrill anymore. It seemed to be out of necessity now. It wasn't fun. We got a bit further away from it. I could tell by the way that the light faded in the car. You know what I mean? It was like a dimmer switch had been dimmed. Even though it was getting darker in the car, I knew that whatever was behind us was still right behind us. It just wanted us to feel secure. I know it did. I don't care if that makes me sound mad. After a while, we approached the lights of the city, and the light went dimmer and dimmer. And after what felt the longest time, I found the courage to look behind me. It looked like we were in the clear. It was pretty scary. I mean, we didn't know what to think. We hypothesized theories over our ramen when we were in the safety of light. Not that light out there in the woods though. Fluorescent lights. We couldn't get our heads around it. We really didn't know how to explain it. We didn't understand what happened that night and went to bed that night with more questions than answers on our minds. I guess that was what prompted my friend to ask me the next day if I wanted to go back to those mountain roads we had driven through the night before, to do a little investigation. I said yes, of course. I wanted to find out just as much as he did. We drove for a while, and then we saw something. No, it's up to you to believe us. I know what I believe. There were a few bouquets of flowers lying by the side of the road. Maybe, just maybe, that strange light that followed on behind us just might have been warning us. A final message from the departed? Maybe from someone who was driving as fast as we were? Or a victim of some kind of tragedy? When idiots like we were thought that the roads were all clear and safe to drive as fast as we felt like down. Well, it doesn't matter, I guess. It doesn't matter what it was. I'm just happy it never encouraged me to drive like my friend did that night. And I don't think he ever drove that fast again either. It's something I've thought about over the years for sure. Pretty creepy, to be honest. But what if I'm just making connections and something else was at play? Either way, I'm glad we got away safely. I don't know if you'll find this scary or just consider it bullshit, but I want to share this with you in the hope that someone may have seen something similar. It happened during May this year. I went fishing in a nearby port. I had caught some pretty big fish there recently, and I was showing a picture of a massive fish I'd caught to one of my friends. Showing off, really. My friend said to me, "Hey, isn't that port where they pulled a body out of the water last week?" I looked it up on the net and found some local news confirming what he said was true. The corpse was unidentified. It was true. Well, I didn't hear anything about it at the time, but I didn't exactly check the news regularly either. It was a bit creepy to come to the realization that I had been fishing in a body of water which had, well, a body in it. The fish I have caught might have even fattened itself up on the poor soul who passed on beneath the murky water. I thought about it over the week and realized that I wasn't alone at the port. There were other anglers, and had I known about it, I wouldn't have gone fishing that day. I mean, it's not like I was intentionally trying to go to the scene of the recently departed. I decided not to allow myself to feel too bad or weirded out by what had happened. It was just a coincidence, or an accident. I believe that me fishing there that day has nothing to do with what happened later. I try not to associate it in that way in my mind. I don't see these things being related, but maybe you might. Anyways, I'm probably not making too much sense yet, so let me just get right to it. About a week or so after I fished in the port, I was driving down a hill. I live by the sea, so I love these hilly roads in my town, and I choose to take them, even if it adds on a few more minutes to my journey. It's really great because you can see the views of the sea. The sea was about 2 kilometers away when this happened. I could see the spot where I was fishing. The port was right in front of me. I looked towards that port, remembering what my friend had told me, and those local news articles I read online. On the embankment of the fishing port, I saw something. Some kind of black dot. From my point of view, it was about the size of a pea. But for some reason, it caught my eye, and I really couldn't stop looking at it. I felt as if I was hyper-focused on that black dot. It'd stolen all of my concentration. The best way I can describe that feeling is like when you go to take a photo on your smartphone and you want to focus on something off in the distance, so you tap the screen and then you get to see whatever you want to take a photo of clearer. I felt that that black dot was looking at me. It's like I locked eyes with something that was so far away I couldn't even make out eyes. It's impossible if you think about it. I felt a gaze, perhaps a stare, on me. You know, like you do when you know that someone's watching you. But I didn't feel any malice in that stare. I didn't feel good about it either. I did feel something though. There was definitely something aware of me and looking at me. That feeling lasted about 2 to 3 seconds before I snapped out of it. I realized that since I was driving, I would do better to keep my eyes on the road rather than look at some mysterious black dot. I went downhill, avoiding looking towards the fishing port. That's basically the end of the experience, and like I said, I don't think the two are related. I told my friend about it, and he seems to believe that they are. He thinks that because I thought about that poor unidentified drowning victim for a while, it kind of manifested itself to me. But I think that it could just as easily be nothing. Well, maybe not nothing. Maybe the workings of an overactive imagination. I don't know, though. I guess I do kind of believe what my friend said, though, because if I didn't, I would have been back to that fishing port again. I loved fishing there, but I just cannot bring myself to go back there at the moment. I don't know, maybe in a couple of weeks, I guess. So what do you think? Do you think that because I thought about that poor soul so much, it revealed itself to me? Or do you think that I've just got an overactive imagination? I bought a house in the suburbs a few years ago, and since I lived pretty close to the train station, I decided that I would use the train to commute to work. This was about 5 years ago, I guess. I had just had my son. These days I drive, and I have to put up with traffic, but there's a very good reason why I drive now, and I'll tell you. On the night this happened, I had been out with some co-workers after work. This kind of thing was standard in our company. We would usually get together, have a drink, like once a month. It was a late night. I knew it was going to be a late one. It always was. I wanted to make it home before the last train. My wife was at home with my son, and I didn't want her to be up late worrying about me. I think I caught the second or third from last train of the night back home. When I got on the train, I noticed it was almost empty, and that was really great. I had enough space to relax. I got a little too relaxed, and I fell asleep actually. I was pretty low on sleep. It was about a 50-minute train ride home, so I thought I might as well catch up on some lost sleep. But I didn't need to change trains either. I woke up, now and then, to see people exiting the train. In the daytime, you could see these huge high-rise apartment blocks from the train windows, so I guess these people were commuters like me. I knew from the station that I was in that I wouldn't be home for another 20 minutes or so I decided against shutting my eyes again. In order not to fall asleep, I stood up and faced the window. I figured that looking at something was probably better than being comfortable in my seat. I wanted the distraction. I watched shapes of buildings pass by under the cover of darkness. I tried to imagine where I was based on the shapes of those buildings. At the next stop, the last couple of people got off, leaving me completely alone. It was kind of unusual to be alone in a train at night. If you've ever seen the trains in Tokyo, you'll understand. They are always super crowded. I enjoyed the rarity of my situation. I was thinking strange things. The buzz I had from the beers earlier was wearing off and tiredness was in full effect. There might have been others on the train, but I'm specifically talking about my carriage. The most popular carriages were at the front because they were closest to the stairs when you got off. I always took about the third or second carriage when I rode the train, but anyway, that's not really important. I was about one station away from home. Between the next station and the station I get off at, there's a tunnel. This tunnel runs right through a mountain and plunges the train into darkness for about 3 minutes or so. When the train went into that tunnel, I used the opportunity to look at myself in the window. Due to the darkness, it acted like a kind of mirror, and I used that mirror to adjust my hair and try to make myself look more presentable for when I would go home and face my wife. What the hell? I heard myself mutter. Reflected in the dark window was a man sat opposite me. He was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. He looked like a hiker. I thought that I was completely alone in that carriage, so I freaked out for a moment. But due to how tired or buzzed I was, did I completely miss this guy? I asked myself. I decided that I did, and I told myself not to worry too much about it. I made a mental note to check my surroundings more thoroughly next time. I tried not to stare as well. I felt as if I couldn't help it though. The guy was staring into the window directly at me. He did not grin. He did not look away. He was fixated on me. The look that he was giving me wasn't a friendly one. I would describe it as expressionless. It was chilling. I didn't like it. I didn't want to turn around and face him. I decided not to be confrontational, for the sake of my wife and my newborn. I would take out my phone and ignore that weirdo stare. As I pulled my phone out of my pocket, I managed to pull my house keys out with it. They fell to the floor. I stooped to pick up the keys, and the next couple of things happened in what felt like a split second. I looked into the window to keep an eye on this guy as I bent down to get the keys. He shot to his feet and emerged about 30 or 50 centimeters behind me. He was holding something in his hand and raising it above his head. It was a small axe, like a handy mountaineering ice pick axe kind of thing. I screamed. I was completely defenseless. I just kind of dived forward, keeping low towards the door to the next carriage. I had a plan in mind to get as close to the driver as possible. As I put my hand on the door that connects to the next carriage, I took the opportunity to look again to see what was happening behind me. It was instinctive. I imagined to see that guy racing right up behind me, but I couldn't see him anymore. He wasn't there. I don't know if he dropped down low to hide or attack in a different manner, or if he was ever there, but I couldn't see him anymore, and that terrified me. I ran right to the front of the train and waited a few terrifying moments, no more than 30 seconds in all actuality, for the train came to a stop at my station. The train pulled in and I shot off of it. A young couple and an office worker stared right at me as they boarded. I was in a complete state. I wanted to run for it, but as I turned to go, I thought about those people who would be getting on the train. Was that man I saw in the reflection of the glass still on board? I made some garbled plea with them not to get on the train, but they ignored me. The train started moving down the tracks and I walked and then ran to keep pace with it. I wanted to catch the attention of those people who boarded. I made some gestures with my arms while shouting at them. I told them not to go into the next carriage as best as I could given the circumstances. I told the station staff, and they threatened to call the police if I didn't stop making a scene. I had just had a close call. I couldn't calm down, I'll have to admit that. But I felt as if they needed to know. I just hope that somebody listened. I hope that whatever I saw was nothing more than the conjuration of a tired mind as well. But something in me doesn't believe that, though. I think that was real. I never commuted to work again. I will never ride through that tunnel again. There are some expenses and inconveniences worth suffering, I guess. It all started when I was in my early 20s. One of my friends moved into a new place and I went to visit her with a housewarming gift. My friend told me that it wasn't a new place exactly. I didn't expect her first home to be new either. She said that it was old, but when I got there, I was really taken aback by just how old it actually was. We spoke about the house when I met her out front. She said something like, "It's a good-sized place for my family. My kids are still young, but by the time they get a bit bigger, we want to have enough saved up to get a different place." It was nice to see her again. I hadn't seen her in a couple of months, maybe half a year. She didn't live locally anymore. I noticed that there was something different about her this time, though. She looked a lot thinner than last time I saw her. Almost emaciated. It was pretty shocking. She had bags under her eyes. I guess that comes with having young children, so I didn't ask or think much of it. She gave me a little tour of the house. I looked out one of the upstairs windows and saw that she lived close to a cemetery. My friend caught me staring into the graveyard, and she said to me with a snigger, "I guess you know why we got this place for such a great price, huh? It's not exactly prime real estate." There was a note of hesitation in her voice, which she tried covering up with that joke, and by laughing at her own circumstances. I wasn't there to judge. The house was nice in my opinion. Not sure about that view though. I noticed something else though. It sounded like they had some noisy neighbors. It looked like a quiet residential area, so I didn't expect that kind of noise. I could hear voices. I guess that was because it was summer. All the neighbors must have their windows open or something. I said to my friend, "Pretty noisy neighbors, huh?" She replied, "What? Not really, I can't hear anything." It is hot though. I guess that she must have gotten used to it. But to me it sounded like a festival was going on out there. I couldn't believe her answer, to be honest. I tried to pinpoint the source of that noise by craning my head out of the window, but I couldn't see anyone. All there was a cemetery. I made sure to keep myself composed in front of my friend, but to be honest with you, those voices had to be coming from somewhere. It sounded like there was a gathering going on, almost as if it was Obon, the national holiday here. It was summer, but a little too early for it to be Obon. It was just weird. Those voices I heard sounded like a mixture of age and gender. Men, women, children, and babies crying. It was a cacophony of noise. I could hear all those voices, but I couldn't make out a single word they were saying. They were mumbling in seemingly angry tones at times. Some were softly laughing maniacal laughs, and others were crying. It didn't sound like a garden party or friends getting together. It was just weird. I couldn't stand being in the presence of all that, so I told my friend that I wasn't feeling well. I made something up about heat stroke, and I went home. I couldn't even make out my friend's reply. I was just so overwhelmed by all the raucous sound of those voices. I couldn't hear her at all. I noticed that my fingers were trembling as I reached out for the latch on her front door to leave. I was more frightened than I think I've ever been in my life, and I couldn't stand it. Even after I had left, I felt as if I could still hear those voices. I couldn't pull myself together for the longest time. I thought there was something really wrong with me. And then I remembered that look I had seen on my friend's face, that look of exhaustion. I felt for sure that she might have been affected by something in the same sense that I was. I had only been in that house for a matter of minutes, and she had been living there for God knows how long. Maybe whatever it was didn't affect her as much as it affected me. Maybe she felt more tired and didn't hear or see anything weird like I did. I wondered if I should have just come clean with her and told her the truth behind why I left so quickly. I mean, could I really do that and sound like a sane person to her afterwards? It seemed only to be me who could hear the voices and not her. I wrestled with the choice of telling her or not for a couple of days, and then that became a couple of weeks. About a month later, I gave her a call just to see how she was doing. I didn't plan on telling her what happened to me, but I did. It just came rushing out of me. And to my surprise, she said, "Huh, yeah, I know. Of course, that makes sense." She seemed to be aware of some kind of presence, as well as her family. She said she had been feeling depressed and incredibly lazy since she had moved there. In addition, their newborn children, twins, had been inconsolable most nights. Something was upsetting the children. She spoke to her husband and pleaded with him to move, and he agreed, which is a bit of a shock because he was just about the most stubborn man I've ever met in my life. So I know that something must have been affecting him as well. They ended up moving, and I ended up visiting with a brand new moving-in gift. The door opened and I was greeted by my friend who looked so much better than the last time I saw her. There was a brightness about her, a glow in fact, that I didn't see last time. I learned not to be swayed by a cheap price. I made sure, when it was time for me to move house, I thoroughly inspected the area. I work in an office in Tokyo. The other night I was out with a bunch of fellow female colleagues. We all went out for some drinks. It was a really great night, actually. I got the last train home to Itabashi, where my apartment is. I was sat down at my desk, using my handheld mirror to take off my makeup ahead of getting ready to sleep. I noticed it almost instantly. There was a doll on my bookcase behind me. It was looking down at me from on high. That's what I thought straight away. It had a white face, like most Japanese dolls do. It also had a red kimono. It's funny, isn't it? When you notice something out of place, you almost can't stop looking at it, can you? It stood out to me because I didn't own a doll like that. In fact, I didn't own any dolls. As soon as I realized that it didn't belong to me, I dropped my handheld mirror and I shrieked. I spun my head round to look at the bookcase, and the doll wasn't there. That scared the living hell out of me at first, but since I was a kid, I was heavily encouraged to look for logical answers and to approach things scientifically instead of irrationally. I managed to convince myself that my eyes had been deceived by nothing more than a trick of the light. I told myself that I didn't have anything to worry about, and I got myself off to sleep. It didn't take long. I was pretty exhausted. Well, about a week passed without anything happening, and I pretty much forgot about what I saw. But that all changed one night. I had just had a real long soak in the bath. I got my underwear on and I sat at the edge of my bed, watching TV, drinking a low-calorie beer. Suddenly, something caught my eye. For some reason, I felt a feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me that something wasn't right. I reverted back to how I felt as a child, young and full of imagination, and the feeling I had was clear. It was a very bad feeling. Before I knew it, my eyes were slowly pulled towards the direction of my bad feeling. I looked towards the window. I had carelessly forgotten to shut the curtains before taking a bath. I didn't usually pay attention to it, to be honest. It's easy to forget when you live in a block of apartments up high. I looked at the gap in the curtains. Due to the darkness of the room and the light of the TV, it provided a great reflection of the room around me. I saw something that I'll never forget. There was the same doll I had seen about a week ago, propped up on my pillow. It was facing me. It was staring at my back as I watched TV, yet when I turned around to face it, it was gone. Everything in me yelled, it was there, but my eyes told me that it wasn't. I couldn't deal with that. I don't care if you call me a coward or anything like that. It wasn't real. It was real. I don't know. I ran out of there, with just my phone in my hand. I didn't even look back to see if that doll was on my bed, like it was in the reflection, because that thing wasn't real. I don't know how to contextualize that experience, because everything in my being tells me it wasn't possible. I stayed with a friend until I got out of my lease. I told my landlord I had to leave urgently, and he didn't seem surprised. I don't think he was interested in the slightest. I don't know what that was. It was really creepy. This is what my friend claims to be a true story. He was working part-time at a theme park. It's a pretty popular place. People from different parts of Japan would probably know it, but I've been asked not to mention its name. A few months after he began work there, he was asked to work the haunted house attraction. Well, I guess he wasn't asked, he was told. The haunted house was located right at the edge of the theme park, sort of like the innermost attraction, the one furthest away from the entrance. The haunted house is most popular with the teens and younger adults. My friend's job was to manipulate props and puppets to scare the guests. The haunted house was dark, so the guests were already on edge. There was a tape playing of creepy noises, and the props that didn't move looked like they could, so it made my friend's job pretty easy to scare people. I will put this simply. My friend loves scaring people. He always has done. He's pretty damn good at it too, considering all the times he scared me as a kid. It seemed like he had found the perfect position for his unusual talents. I could tell that he really enjoyed working there too. The theme park generally closed at about 6 p.m, and that was the time the guests were expected to leave. There were about 8 people in total who worked in there with him. Some were actors, some were other prop movers, I guess, and some were taking tickets and admission, you know. They all did the same sort of thing he did there, and took turns doing it. One night just after 6, when everyone was getting ready to head home, my friend heard something strange. It happened when they were getting changed, out of their costumes and removing their makeup. My friend said that It sounded like a woman screamed. 2 short bursts of screams. "Did you guys hear a woman shouting or screaming just now?" he asked his co-workers. He thought that there might be a guest still in the ghost house or something. However, none of his co-workers claimed to hear the sound of screaming. My friend thought that it could have just been his imagination, since he had spent most of the day listening to people yelling and screaming. He put it to the back of his mind, got changed, and clocked out. He was on shift, again the following day, and it was another great day of scaring people for him. However, something was a little off, he said. He kept feeling as if he was being watched. Obviously, in his line of work, if someone sees behind the curtain, so to speak, it gives away the authenticity of the haunted house. So he was pretty cautious of his surroundings. Whenever he felt the eyes of someone on him, he would look around to see no one near him. He said he missed scaring someone because he was so distracted by that feeling. He decided to put it to the back of his mind, like the scream he had heard the night before. Another slightly weird day, he thinks to himself as he heads back to the changing room to get ready to head home. As he is heading into the staff room, he hears that scream again. This time he knows that he had personally done a sweep of the haunted house to make sure that there were no more guests in the building, and this time he goes to investigate. He walks down the dark corridors, turns a corner and runs into a woman covered in blood from head to toe. She does that scream he had been hearing, and she runs off into the darkness. He is obviously surprised by this, as it isn't really normal for the staff to scare one another. He doesn't know what to do, but he thinks it's just another employee playing a prank on him, so he shouts off in the direction the woman ran in, "Who is that?" He doesn't get an answer. He asked his co-workers, and they had no clue what he was talking about. They went with him back to the scene of where it happened, and all they could see was a bloody prop mannequin. He felt so embarrassed by it all, and he said that he might be seeing things and also hearing things. Deep down, he thought that there was something more at play there. A couple of days later, and he's working behind the scenes, trying to frighten the guests again, when he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. He spun around to find out who was there, and he came face to face with a woman covered in blood. He said that she looked just like the one he saw in the ghost house the night before. He didn't panic. He just stared at her, trying to make out what she might look like with all the fake blood covering her. She smiled and ran off behind the curtain back into the ghost house. He was sure at this point that he was being pranked by another employee, so later, when everyone was getting ready to leave, he singled out the female employees and asked them if they had covered themselves in fake blood to try to scare him earlier. They all replied no, and they had no idea what he was talking about. My friend was so creeped out by what was going on, he started hating coming to work. He pleaded to change roles within the theme park and no longer work the ghost house. He said that the eerie feeling of being watched didn't end in the ghost house. He started to feel like that at home. He said that he was getting a fever too. He really thought that something was going on and it was connected to what he was seeing in the ghost house. He has told me that he doesn't think it was a spirit there. He thinks that it was a very real person who had been either sneaking into the haunted house attraction to mess with people, or a very odd member of staff who just specifically wanted to scare him. I think that he shouldn't rule out the paranormal, but he isn't interested in that theory. I mean, there could be some kind of residual energy out there that might be drawn to a place of horror, I guess. I don't know. I like to believe in the supernatural, so maybe that's why I like that idea. At the end of the month, he was allowed to move off of the ghost house, so I guess we'll never know.